A senior EU official has said drones spotted in Dublin Bay last week are the latest example of hybrid attacks from Russia. It's the first time that an official has publicly blamed Russia for the incident, which took place after Volodymyr Zelenskyy's plane had landed in Dublin. However, European Council President Antonio Costa also said he had full confidence in Ireland's security arrangements for hosting the EU presidency next year. Joining me to discuss this are John Mooney, Investigations Editor with the Sunday Times Ireland edition, and Cathal Berry, former independent TD and a retired army officer. And we're also joined from Finland by Shauna Murray, Europe Correspondent with Euronews. And you can send us your comments, simply scan the QR code or contact us via the WhatsApp number. John Mooney, so this day last week, we were congratulating ourselves for showing Volodymyr Zelenskyy around Ireland and discussing our support for Ukraine. But there was a serious incident that had occurred the night before when he flew from Paris into Dublin. Can you tell us what happened in and around that hour?
Well, shortly before President Zelenskyy landed in Dublin, there was a series of drones, or probably 5 drones, seen about 13 to 10 nautical miles off Dublin. They hovered over the William Butler Yeats and before then heading back towards land and disappearing. So the general consensus was this was a hybrid attack. It was probably Russian state-sponsored by one of their intelligence services, probably their military intelligence service, the GRU, and that possibly was designed to impact on the flight path of President Zelenskyy's plane as it arrived, but it was actually already on the ground when this incident happened. So the government, I suppose, attempted to try conceal this. This wasn't disclosed in any way, and it eventually got out, and we've seen various reporting on it ever since. So this type of activity is going on every week across Europe. This was unusual insofar it was the first time that Zelenskyy himself has been targeted. So you've got to stand back and look at it from lots of different perspectives. Number one, the Ukrainian intelligence service would be concerned about his security. They're obviously tracking his movements quite closely, but also the planning of something like this, to be able to pull this off as he arrived, says a lot about the ingenuity and the determination, ability of the Russian intelligence service in this regard, because there had to be a lot of components to make that work.
Yeah, so talk to me about what sort of drones are we talking about? Are you talking about small ones that amateur drone operators could fly here? Are you talking about big operational ones? Where would they have taken off from? Would that be land or sea? How would the logistics operate here?
So they're military-grade drones. They're about the size of a wooden pallet, freight pallet. They'll have various protections inbuilt into them, depending on who's piloting it. So you're looking at 5 or maybe 5 pilots, but you're also looking at spotters on the land. They may have taken off from a cargo vessel. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. Russian hybrid attacks involving drones are usually organised from European vessels, cargo freight vessels, passing through European waters. They're not directed or organised from the Russian shadow fleet, which is transporting oil. But this part of this would make me wonder whether it was organised from land. Russian services are here the whole time, and they have been here for a very long time. They're running illegal networks here. They engage with organised crime, with terrorist groups, and in some cases, extremist groups. So they've a lot of network, a lot of clout here, and they're in and out of the UK, France and Germany and everywhere else the whole time. So this is a European problem. Whether they have the ability to pull that off in Dublin, it's quite conceivable that they would. That raises a number of different issues, because obviously this group are that carried this out. The guards quite clearly don't know who they are, and neither does military intelligence. So it raises lots of different issues when you sit back and you look at all the potential avenues to explore. If it was a cargo vessel that it was organised from, again, to have that cargo vessel passing at the relevant times, that they had the ability to be able to monitor where William Butler Yeats was, how when Zelenskyy's aircraft was coming in. There's lots of different moving components to that picture, but they managed to pull it off.
So Obviously, people will have a lot of questions about this. Who's investigating it? What evidence is there that there was actually such an incident, that this wasn't just some amateur operation or something like that got in the wrong place at the right time? How do we know what exactly had happened here?
So there was a crew of the William Butler Yeats had called this in as that these are military-grade drones, and they made that call from seeing them. The drones themselves, I understand, were captured on CCTV footage on the William Butler Yeats, which is there to protect it when it's in dock. So you have all of that. They hovered above the William Butler Yeats for about 45 minutes. They wanted to be seen. This is classic Russian disruption activity, letting the Irish security services, the military services and the government know they're capable of doing this. It's kind of loud-hailer diplomacy from its classic Russian behaviour. So there's no easy way to say this, but there seems to have been confusion over who exactly was responsible for this. Eventually, when the story emerged, Garda headquarters announced a special branch were conducting an investigation that was announced on Friday. So there was a period of 3 or 4 days where no one was doing anything on this. I'm not sure special branch, and I don't mean this in any disrespect to them at all, have the capabilities to organise an investigation of that nature. It's a very specific type of investigation. It could be offshore. It's tracking vessels. It's not the normal type of activity you would anticipate a Garda anti-terrorist unit to be doing. However, behind all of this, what usually happens is you'll have our security and intelligence departments of the Guards, but you'll also have the Irish Military Intelligence Service tracking this and investigating it and trying to come up with a profile of possibly who was involved, where this attack emanated from, and what was its intentions.
Cathal Berry, can I bring you in here? Because John has outlined what happened. I'm kind of concerned about the response to it. Was the appropriate action taken on the night in question? Should, for example, warning shots have been fired here? Ultimately, we have a military vessel in the sea for that particular reason of protecting our seas and our air at the time that a VIP is flying in. Should some action have been taken on the night itself?
Yeah. So first of all, we don't know a whole lot, Fionnán, and I suspect a press conference would probably be a good way to start. Like normally, if there's a serious Garda investigation, the Guards would do a press conference and there'd be appeal for information, a request for dash cam footage, anybody who's seen anything unusual like a trawler or an airline pilot, but none of that has happened. And that's why the public are really concerned, because normally they would be shared with, or the information that is available will be shared. But unfortunately, it hasn't. That's why people are genuinely concerned. But going back to your specific question in relation to the rules of engagement and whether the naval ship should have fired on that, and absolutely not. I mean, this is a very experienced crew, a very experienced ship. This is precisely the same vessel that fired at the MV Matthew only 2 years ago and took down the drug ship. So very, very seasoned mariners. And according to Conor Gallagher's article this morning in the Irish Times, there were 13 nautical miles offshore. So that's outside territorial waters. So it's international waters. So British frigates and Russian submarines regularly interact on the high seas. That doesn't give either of them the right to shoot at each other, nor should they. Similarly, when the Antar shows up, Irish Air Corps Maritime Squadron can fly over the vessel in international waters. That doesn't give the Antar right to fire back. So the captain of the ship was 100% right. First of all, shouldn't have engaged and didn't, thankfully, for the reasons outlined. If it's outside of territorial waters, there's no jurisdiction. So there's no violation of Irish airspace, no violation of the drone no-fly zone, if it is true that they're at 13 nautical miles. Secondly, you're in a very, very busy flight plan corridor into Dublin Airport, your main international airport. Most aircraft will be travelling about 5,000 or 6,000 feet. You don't want to be pumping a load of lead up into the sky, night sky there from that perspective. Thirdly, I would say their mission has already been accomplished. President Zelenskyy had safely landed at Dublin Airport. But most importantly, I guess you can shoot down a drone if you wish, and it'll end up at the bottom of the Irish Sea. You'll never see again. But a far more useful tactic would be to see, can you track the drones to return back to their mothership or their point of origin. Now, that is where it really comes into to the fore, because if you can apprehend the operators and at least identify and pinpoint where it's come from, that's of significant value for a further investigation.
What about, OK, so the rules of engagement were followed on the night itself. What about John's point about who is responsible for investigating an incident like this? Is it the Gardaí? Is it the Defence Forces? Is there a gap here in our security mechanism?
Brilliant question, and absolutely. So a national security strategy, and John will know this, has been promised for over 5 years. So there was a public consultation 5 years ago, and there's still no national security strategy produced or published. And a national security strategy would probably do about 3 things. First of all, it would lay out the demarcation lines between the Garda Síochána, the Defence Force and the other state security services. That hasn't been done. It would update the rules of engagement, number 2. And then thirdly, it would lay down the decision-making protocols in relation to who makes specific decisions in relation to fire or no fire. So, I mean, this coordinating document is really important, and there's no sign of it yet. It's been promised to me by numerous Taoiseach on the floor of Dáil at this stage, but it still hasn't seen the light of day. And it costs nothing. There's no reason for it. If you have meagre assets, which we do, the very least we can do is coordinate them to a high degree, and unfortunately that coordination isn't there at the moment.
If this was a drugs gang, for example, using a drone to transport drugs and to deliver them from sea to land, it would be quite clear that that's a Garda issue. In this case, who is supposed to investigate this incident?
So, again, it's unclear, but I would argue that if it's outside the 12 nautical mile limit, then the Garda Síochána do not have jurisdiction.
Okay.
And that's where the Defence Forces come in. So, normally from an internal security point of view, the Garda Síochána quite rightly have primacy and they take the lead.
Okay.
In a war-fighting scenario, in times of conflict, the Defence Forces would take the lead. But we're in a kind of a grey zone, if you pardon the pun. We're in the hybrid space now, where there's significant overlap and it's unclear, to answer your specific question. And that's why the national security strategy is so important.
Shauna Murray, if I can bring you in there, it was intriguing to see Antonio Costa talk about this today. It clearly has raised eyebrows right across Europe in terms of knowledge of the incident. How fair is it to say that this has caused concerns, or is it just another one of the incidents that several European countries have encountered recently?
I think it's another one of these incidents that several European countries have encountered. I think it is unusual that it's happening in Ireland, but obviously it was Zelenskyy coming to Dublin, so they would imagine that something like this could happen. Although, of course, as we heard there, the fact that they were so close to where Zelenskyy was coming in at the right time with such great accuracy is obviously worrying, because it's likely that Zelenskyy will be back in Ireland next year when Ireland hosts the presidency of the European Council, because not just will Ireland be hosting the Council, which is the 27 member states, but there's also a European political community event, which is over 45 countries. So you're talking about Western Balkans, the Turkish President Erdogan, probably Zelenskyy as well. That'll be the biggest hosting that Ireland will ever have had when it comes to international leaders. And we've no idea where the war in Ukraine will be at that point. So that is going to be huge amount of pressure for the Irish authorities at that point. So I think definitely there might be concern if Ireland isn't ready in terms of defence at that stage.
You're in Finland. You're actually there to observe and report upon this very issue as the Finns have been experiencing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is a sort of a NATO demonstration on the Eastern Flank deterrence line, which deals with drones coming into Europe, whether they come into the Baltics, Finland, Poland, and so on. And what the solution is to shoot them down, to intercept them, because obviously they have to do it in a cost-effective way. When you have lots of drones, it's very, very expensive to shoot them down using jets and so on. So this is something that NATO and the EU countries are looking at, because they know that this is the future, really, whether it's drone technology on the battlefield in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine, or also these constant incursions into European airspace that are designed to disrupt and cause harm and cause damage and cause fear in society. And the problem is that as NATO and Europe develop proper drone technology, Russia does likewise. So, in contrast to, let's say, the arms race, this is like a drone technology race.
Cathal, Antonio Costa may have expressed confidence in Ireland's ability to effectively defend the EU presidency next year, when we'll have officials, ambassadors, leaders, prime ministers, presidents from every country coming here at various different times right across a 6-month period. Are we that confident ourselves in our ability to defend our own skies and waters during that period?
So, first of all, he would have to say that, of course. But what's implied in what he said is Ireland will have to get extensive external assistance. And we've seen that even in the last week, that there was Portuguese and French police and PSNI police in Dublin with anti-drone technology on Leinster House and in government buildings. I mean, that is a real slap in the face to the Irish Security Service, who are brilliant people, but don't have the equipment to carry out the function. So they weren't just guarding Irish Parliament, they were guarding Irish democracy. And our own security service, after 100 years of independence, were incapable and unresourced to do so. And the big take-home point for me over the last week has been how inadequately our naval service have been equipped. I mean, there's no radar on our ships. We're the only capital city in the entire of the European Union with no primary radar coverage. We can't even monitor what's happening over our own capital city, our own main international airport.
So your point is that, listen, in the next 6 months, we're not going to be able to build up that capacity. Let's just be honest about it, even if we went out and signed a blank cheque in the morning. So your point is we're going to be outsourcing our own security to European neighbours for that 6-month period.
Again. So we've had...
So this isn't just borrowing the PSNI's water truck for riots. This is on a far bigger scale than that here.
We will most likely have police and paramilitary international people on the ground with their equipment. And we will most likely have international navy and air forces in our airspace and in our maritime domain. And that's the only way for this to happen.
And what's the legality around that?
Good question. So bringing police in isn't the problem. But there is constitutional issues if external militaries are operating in Ireland's jurisdiction. Now, you can get around that by keeping your naval ships outside the 12 nautical mile limit. But as Michael McDougall raised, that it is most likely inconsistent with the Constitution. The Constitution is quite clear that every armed element operating within this jurisdiction must be under the control of the Oireachtas. And that's obviously an anti-provisional IRA measure, but it still applies to external agencies as well. So they can come in here and train and go on ceremonial duties, but operational duties is a completely different scenario.
John, from those observing events last week in government buildings in Leinster House said they felt the security operation was even more intense than when Joe Biden was here 2 years earlier. Now, we kind of always view the arrival of American president as the biggest operation of all. Is that a correct assertion? And how much of that was borrowing upon external security forces to help us out?
So I think there's a lot of cooperation and input from external agencies, and particularly intelligence services. But I think it's really important when we're having this discussion to remember that drones are just one part of hybrid activity. The Irish security services and the military intelligence services will be also thinking about everything that Russia's doing right across Europe at the moment that you don't hear so much about. So that's where you have sabotage attacks, you've had murders in some cases, you have anti-immigrant sentiments being stoked up by people that are sometimes paid to engage in kind of meaningless acts where they maybe throw pigs' heads into mosques and all this type of activity going on. So there's lots of other things going on as well right across Europe that European police forces and agencies are dealing with on an almost weekly basis. I was involved as a consultant in a recent project tracking Russian sabotage operations across Europe recently, and when you saw the list that was compiled and some of the ingenious methods that were being used to ferment and sow discord, it was quite breathtaking, the sheer level of activity. I think drones are one problem. A potential attack on some form of critical infrastructure will be one problem. But there's every likelihood we're going to see something else that we just haven't thought about. And, you know, and I don't like to say this, but that hybrid incident that Russia caused last week in Dublin was a complete success for them.
Okay.
They would be
because
high-fiving
now got
it
the
in
headlines,
the aquarium. They turned elements of the state against each other.
Yeah.
They exposed the Irish government on its mishandling.
And part of it is undermining the state.
Yeah.
Shauna, are you confident we're going to be capable of carrying out our 6-month EU presidency and that everything that's supposed to take place here is going to happen here?
I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think, you know, from John's perspective, he's 100% right. If you look here in Finland, for example, this is a country that has one of the most comprehensive security systems probably in the world. I mean, despite it was a neutral country, but has always maintained, for example, conscription, has a very great policy where the public and the private sector work together. They educate kids in school around misinformation and disinformation. Yet they've suffered a lot when it comes to, let's say, cutting of cable ties, undersea cables, which Ireland has, as we know. Disinformation, as we heard from John there, the use of migrants at the Russian border with Finland. Finland has a 1,350 kilometre Russian border, the largest in NATO. So it suffers quite a bit. And so it's a challenge for a country like Finland, which has a brilliant security strategy, a deterrence strategy. It's a challenge for Baltic countries, which spend around 6%, some of them, on defence. So it's going to be a major challenge for Ireland, particularly when you even heard there we don't have the radar systems, although I know that's on the agenda for the government, but it may not materialise in time for the presidency. So it'll be very, very difficult. And obviously the government will have to invite in support from European partners. I mean, I don't think it's about sort of, allowing them take over from a sovereign perspective, but certainly there will have to be at least military intelligence from the UK, potentially from the United States, but definitely from European allies.